Let us begin by reading the word problem out loud. Karen was the leading seller at her work this week. Due to her outstanding performance, she was rewarded with an additional 8-hour shift for next week. She will now be working a total of 52 hours over the course of these 2 weeks. How many hours did Karen work this week, and how many hours will she be working next week? So let us begin our strategy for problem solving by analyzing the problem. Now keep in mind that the first thing we want to do when analyzing the word problem is we want to identify the question that's being asked. So in this case, the question is, how many hours did Karen work this week, and how many hours will she be working next week? So those are the two questions that we want to answer. So now with that being said, there's two questions we want to answer. They're separated by the word and. The first is, how many hours did Karen work this week? So that's going to be represented by one variable. And the second is, how many hours will she be working next week? It's going to be represented by the second variable. We'll go ahead and use x for the first and y for the second. So let us go ahead and assign a variable now that we know what our variables are going to represent. So we'll go ahead and let the variable x equal the amount of hours Karen worked this week, and we'll let y equal the amount of hours Karen will work next week. So now that we know what our variables are going to represent, let us go ahead and go back to analyzing the problem and seeing what other information we can extract. So what else do we know? Well, we know that due to her outstanding performance, she was rewarded with an additional 8 hours for next week. So for next week, she's going to be working 8 more hours than this week. So we're going to go ahead and make a note of that. And again, that's all about additional 8 hours for next week. And then we also know that she will be working a total of 52 hours for the last 2 weeks. So we have she worked hours this week, and then she'll be working hours next week, and these two combined total up to 52 hours. And again, that's 52 hours for the 2 weeks, and that is the total. So let's go ahead and create an equation. So what do we know? Well, we know x represents the amount of hours Karen worked this week. Well, what else do we know about the amount of hours that she worked next week? So we know that next week she's going to be working 8 more hours. So we're going to have x, which is the amount of hours she worked this week. And we're going to want to add to that 8 more hours. And now this is going to be equal to our variable y, which is the amount of hours that she will work next week. So that's going to be our first equation, x plus 8 equals y. Now for our second equation, we know that she worked a total of 52 hours over the course of these 2 weeks. So we know that 52 is going to be equal to the number of hours that she worked this week, which is represented by x, plus the number of hours that she will be working next week, which is represented by y. So those are going to be our two equations. So again, let's go ahead and solve them. So we'll start off by writing them out. And we have x plus 8 is equal to y. That's our first equation. And we have 52 is equal to x plus y as our second equation. So notice that in the first equation, y is already solved for. So we're going to go ahead and use this equation and substitute it into the second equation. So wherever we see a y, we're going to substitute x plus 8 in its place. So here we go. We're going to have 52 is equal to x plus y, which is equal to x plus 8. So now on the left-hand side of this equation, we're going to have simply a 52 And on the right-hand side, we're going to have x plus x, which is going to give us a 2x, plus 8. And now again, we're going to want to solve for the variable x in this case. So the problem right now is that we're multiplying it by 2, and we're adding 8. So we're going to take care of the addition first. And in order to take care of that is we're going to have to subtract 8 from both sides. So we'll end up with 52 minus 8 is equal to 2x plus 8 minus 8. So on the right hand side, the positive 8 and the negative 8 simplify out, leaving us with 2x. And on the left hand side, 52 minus 8, after you show the work, you'll see that you end up with 44. So now again, the problem is that we're multiplying the x by 2 right now. We want to undo that multiplication. The only way to undo multiplication is by division. So we're going to go ahead and divide both sides out. And we're going to divide both sides out by 2, which is the number that we want to eliminate. So on the right hand side, we end up with a 2 divided by a 2, which simplifies down to a 1. So we're left simply with 1x, or just x. And then 44 divided by 2 gives us 22. So now we have the value of x. So now we're going to go ahead and substitute that back in to the original equation to solve for y now. So now we know 22 is equal to x. We're going to substitute that in. And we still have plus 8 is equal to y. So once we do 22 plus 8, you'll see that you end up with 30 is equal to y. So now we have the value of x, and we also have the value of y. So now let us state the conclusion clearly. The question asked, how many hours did Karen work this week? And how many hours will she be working next week? So we're going to go ahead and say our conclusion as the following. So Karen worked 22 hours this week and will work 30 hours next week. So again, our conclusion is simply the question reworded in the form of a statement. So now let us go ahead and check the result. Again, when checking the result, you always want to start off with the original equation found in step 3. So we'll have x plus 8 is equal to y. That's our first equation. And your second equation is going to be 52 is equal to x plus y. So substituting in, we know that x is equal to 22. We're going to add 8 to that, and we're going to see if that's equal to 30. Once we do 22 plus 8, we do get 30. So we end up with 30 is equal to 30. That is a true statement, so this solution is correct. Now let's go ahead and verify that the second equation is correct. So we end up with 52 is equal to x, which is 30. And we want to add to that y. However, we know that y is equal to 22. So when we sum these up, we end up with 52 on the left. And we also end up with 52 on the right. So since we end up with the same solution on both sides, this is indeed correct as well. And therefore, both our solutions are correct. And we have our question answered.